Joe Schorr. Thanks very much
Good,
for
good,
joining me
good to
today.
be
How are
here.
you? You have an amazing career path. You are responsible for unbelievable P&L today, profit and loss, but your career has really progressed into the pinnacle of customer facing for cybersecurity. But I want to, and you carry a lot of clout for the people that are not familiar with all the stuff you've done. Maybe just walk me
Sure.
through memory lane.
I like to say the front half of my career is 99% consulting. I had a stint as a CIO, so I got to sit behind a big chair in a corner office for a while. But most of it was in professional services and consulting, starting off with all the big iron, Cisco routing and switching, all that kind of stuff, and then morphing into security. And I jumped into security right on the really sexy part of it, the offensive security and penetration testing and risk assessments and all the fun stuff. And then as time went on, I got gravitated more and more towards the conversation being elevated, and you're starting to have to remediate things and explain those results and talk to people higher and higher up in the food chain. So all of a sudden, you're helping a CISO explain to his board of directors exactly what good looks like, or what the competitors are doing, or why aren't we at risk more than our neighbor down the street. And around that same time, I started to move more and more into the, like I said, the customer facing sales side of it, the go-to-market side of it. So the past, I'd say 10, 12 years have been almost exclusively on that part of it, dealing with the C-level, the board level type of folks, everything from trying to help them roadmap their 5-year plans to, unfortunately, sometimes do a breach response, or what their defensive posture is going to look like after a breach. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride, like you said. It's from the tip of the spear to the board.
And and let me ask you this, and this is why I like this type of unscripted conversation. So there are tens of thousands of salespeople that trying to elevate themselves into that next
Mm-hmm.
level conversation, meaning being on the consultative side, at the eye level with the executives and providing real value, because that's where the real magic happens at that level. But a lot of them just stay stuck in the transactional conversation. They cannot bring themselves up to that. Now, because you've done this and you sit in that seat, what would you recommend? And how do you do that? How do you create that kind of transition from talking about tactical point in time conversation
Yeah,
to the
it's
bigger
funny. It's
thing?
almost like a nature versus nurture conversation. A lot of times, like you tend to stick with what's successful for you. So I always tend to try and keep people around me, or hire people, or bring people into the team that have a similar background, quite frankly. They might have had that consulting experience in their past, or they were director or partner at a big four and had to deal with these types of issues all the time, or they came up through the C-suite and they sat in that chair for a long time. There's two things. There's a degree of empathy, and there's a term called radical candor. I think a lot of people are what people think of as that pure salesperson, that bag carrying seller, have all the candor. Like they're great at telling it like it is, and they go for the sale, and they're persistent, and they do all those things you want in a great seller, but they might lack a little bit of that emotional intelligence that only comes from having some of those scars, from feeling a little bit of that pain, from either sitting in that seat as a manager or director, or sitting in a SOC, or responding to breaches, or helping clients do it. I think the best sellers oddly, they have a rather agnostic view of things. You could be selling a SaaS cybersecurity product, and if you're the salesperson in there telling them, maybe this year isn't the year that you buy this, maybe you need to get your identity project squared away before you worry about whatever I'm selling. I'll call you in 6 months, and hopefully everything's cool and we can talk again. You have to have that ability to realize that you can't just pound it down people's throats when you're dealing with something like risk and security.
And why not, Joe? Why not? You as you mentioned, you had the corner office, you had a C-level title, and you could have just done phenomenally well taking that route. We know that these are the really good ones are hard to come by, and they're responsible for the organizational direction from a technology perspective. So why not continue? Why did you decide to move into the kind of the other side?
I think that's the consulting gene. I think there's just too much of me that likes fixing things or helping other people fix things. And my name's Joseph. I'm named after Joseph the carpenter. I think I'm literally just a natural troubleshooter, fixer, like the ultimate Monday morning quarterback. I make no bones about it. I love telling people what they did wrong and how to fix it. So if you're sitting there and you have your own shop, it's great that your work truck gets tired of hearing you preach to them all the time. You gotta get out there and share it.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's funny because that role carries this high risk, high reward. Meaning, as you mentioned, there are cases where you have to have the difficult conversations. You're dealing with people that are in the worst time, like from a career perspective. There's a breach or something that happened. You come in and you deal with them with their absolute low. So it's not all fun and games. There's difficult moments.
Again,
how do you deal with those?
Yeah.
Maybe share some stories.
Yeah, that
People
goes back
stories.
to that radical candor thing. You have to be perfectly honest with people to the point of being blunt sometimes. And you're right. You're seeing people, if you're talking about breach response and things like that, or even if you're a new CXO level person taking over a seat, you're seeing people at their busiest, most distracted, most worried. If it's a breach, they're worried about their job, worried about everything else. Their kids still have soccer practice, no matter what dad's got to deal with or mom's got to deal with at work. So if there's a lot of press for the past 15, 20 years with the term, which I'm really starting to hate. I started hating it 5 years ago. It was trusted advisor. It gets overused so much. Like the person coming in and selling you desktop licenses of antivirus is not going to be your trusted advisor. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. But if you're good enough and you've got the pedigree to a degree, you can be that trusted advisor. But trusted advisor doesn't mean stamping your blueprint onto something. I heard it from a marriage counselor one time. He said, do you want to be right or you want to be married? And sometimes you may think you're right, but to keep this marriage going and to really help this person through that journey, you got to put your ego in check a bit. I think a lot of consultants, a lot of salespeople tend to forget that. I have the best toy. It will fix your X problem, period. You need to listen to me right now. And again, it's not always that. I always say sometimes you almost figuratively and literally have to put yourself around that desk, put your arm around that person and just say, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this together. Like you're not alone. I can't fix all this, but you've got a path and you've got people to help you.
And speaking of trust, it's such a delicate thing.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a long time to build and almost like seconds to destroy. How does that manifest itself in the kind of the corporate world with these C-level executives?
Unless you've got a super duper relationship with people, you only get so many at bats and really so many mistakes you're able to make. A lot of times you may have an at bat and you've only got one strike to give. It's difficult. And sometimes it takes, I think I started to allude to this a little bit. Sometimes it takes walking away. I've secured, for lack of a better term, more business by really saying no to clients sometimes. Having them, they've got X amount of money for a budget. I know I can eat that whole budget up, honestly. I can design a roadmap and a plan, a project for them that'll spend their money. It'll make them more secure. They'll be less at risk, but it may not be the exact right move for what they need as a business, what they're really trying to do as a business. The best way to secure trust with any of these folks you're speaking with is really to understand literally what they do for a living, like understand their core business and help them make their business better. Sometimes it's not just helping them comply with the auditors and they're in the next room. That may be a tactical thing they need some help with, but the bigger issue may be, okay, once we get through this audit, we're also talking about expanding business into China in the next 18 months. Let's talk about that. That's where you need help with. I can help you with this stuff here, but let's get that done quickly, make you look like a hero, get you a success on the score sheet, and then let's start talking about the things that really matter to your business. Because no matter what your title is in the company, you're on the business of making widgets, which I've heard from the old argument used to be the C-level people would say, no one's going to bother. Who wants to hack us? We just make widgets. I always call it the widget conversation. And luckily, people have gotten past that. They realize that everybody can be hit for a variety of reasons. But when push comes to shove, they still are making widgets. And you need to realize that they're not in the business of buying your stuff or buying your services. They're in the business of making, building, selling, educating, healing. There's a myriad of concerns and constraints they have that you need to be aware of. That's how you build trust.
And it's interesting you mentioned widgets, because sometimes the process that got perfected over 30 years of how to make these widgets is very valuable to a nation state or someone else. And that IP is, even though they're not going to steal your widget, they're going to steal your IP that manufacture these widgets to perfection. Now, let me ask you this. In the process of uncovering what's important to them from a business perspective, that's not, you glanced over, but that's not trivial as well, because first and foremost, it's a conversation that it's a whole different level. Like sometimes they don't know what it is that they necessarily want to do and achieve, or they think they know, yet a few more questions and you uncover the kind of the truth. So how do you gain that skill set of being able to ask the right question and really listen? I think that sometimes the salespeople are just, again, they're focused, they're fascinated, they're just trying to get the sale, and they only listen to the point where they want to intervene, just wait for them to finish the talk so they can jump in and tell them why they're better.
There's actually I'm gratified to see it. There's a new methodology starting to hit sales a little bit, and it boils down to recurring impact leads to recurring revenue. It sounds, so we're trying to make more money. Like that's what companies do. It's a capitalist society, but it's a win. If you can help your clients invest a lot of money. They've bought into services or software or something, $3 million over 3 years, whatever it is, or $3 million or $300,000, whatever that big chunk of money is to them. They're only going to get value out of it, literally, if they see some kind of impact. And the gift that the good people have is helping the client, like you said, helping the client realize what that impact is, even if they don't really recognize it. They may go into it, or with the massive turnover in the C-suite, especially with IT and security, a lot of your job sometimes revolves around getting the new person up to speed and reinforcing with them. This is why you're coming in, you want to change things. I get it. You've got a better way to do everything, but you can actually be that bridge that helps that new regime and those new people figure out, why did they sign this 3-year contract? If you're at least getting a voice, but they're not just canceling you outright or whatever it may be, that's your big chance to say, they did it for these reasons. And going forward, you're going to see these impacts going down the line. In year 2, you're going to get this done. In year 3, it's going to be this. And hopefully by the time we get to year 3 and we talk about renewal, I'm not just walking in, getting you to check a box and say, yeah, we'll do it for 3 more years. We'll be able to show like what this impact was. Or if you're going to leave here and you're moving on, your successor is going to be able to see why you made this good decision and why it may behoove them to keep doing the same thing moving forward. So helping the client, like you said, helping the client figure out how this impacts their business or their organization. That's a lot of the hard work that, again, goes back to, if you've got a consultative mindset, it's in your DNA. You're constantly asking questions and constantly trying to look at process improvement and things like that. You touched on a little bit with process and people and policies. The worst environments you run into are where they are very people driven. Like, a lot of these things are people problems, but the worst environments are where they're doing things by heroics, where they just throw bodies at problems and just try and solve it through sheer hours. The environments where they actually get it is where it is process driven. And if you're a seller that's concentrating on just the heroics part of it, buy more tools, get more people, get more stuff done, sell more stuff, just keep layering on cement onto the outside, you're going to fail. If you're the one that helps them identify those pieces of the process where they can improve, even if it doesn't help you personally that quarter, make that sale, if you're helping them with that process and those impacts, you will be rewarded. It might be next quarter, it might be next year, but that's where you get to that trusted advisor stage. Because they have millions of things they're trying to do every day. So helping them identify that these different impacts in their business is enormously helpful.
And it seems like the relationship in the past several years between the vendors and enterprise has been a source of contention a little bit. Just, you can see that from some comments in the social media, LinkedIn, X, and so on, where the enterprise is complaining about the kind of the vendors, like, trying to shove like technology down their throat, products and so on. And on the other side, the vendors are complaining that the fact that they have all these excellent tools and processes and services, but nobody's willing to listen. Nobody's willing to give it a chance. So where do you think the issue would lie?
All of the above. There are we had this amazing kind of SaaS revolution of like 2019 to 2021-ish timeframe, where companies were just getting stood up like crazy and the money was flowing and VCs were, and you had everybody that had two guys, a dog, and a bag of money could build a better mousetrap. And sometimes people built 20 similar mousetraps at the same time and all went to market together, and they all started hitting up everybody over LinkedIn and email and robocalls and business development and everything else. At the same time that these people in the C-suite, as the SaaS revolution is winding down a little bit and the money's starting to dry up and everybody's getting more desperate, the budgets inside the clients are getting smaller and they're having to do more with less. So it's like the market's saturated with all these great products and great ideas. The budgets are getting smaller. Everybody's got to do more with less. And you wind up with one of the greatest things we do these days as a service for clients is literally tools optimization. We go in and audit what they've got, what they really need. We discover things that they bought. And this has been going on since I got into IT. You find things figuratively that are sitting on the shelf that they pay maintenance fees every month and have no clue, or every year, and have no clue it's there, or who bought it, or why they're using it. So the optimization stuff that's going on in the law, the vendors look at probably, God, they're going to wind up with 4 products and we're never going to get in there. I think it's going to be the opposite. People are going to clean up their shops, get rid of the stuff they don't need, and again, this is where the good sellers get it. Help your client create a little bit of breathing room to blend some sanity to this whole thing, take a little bit of a half step back so they can take 2 steps forward. And then the products that have survived this far, the new ones coming out of the pipeline, they've got a shot to get in there now. I think just the selling motions are going to have to be different. Like I said, that's why there's new go-to-market methodologies. The things that worked in 2019 do not work in 2024. It is definitely a different world. And then you layer on AI and the marketing you can do through that and the different sales things you get through. It's getting revolutionary. It's like everything else. It's going to be like AI fighting AI. I think that the CISOs are going to probably have some sort of automated denial mechanism to hang up on salespeople that are trying to get in. It's a crazy world.
But I think it's never been more interesting times than we are right now. It's really remarkable. It's always like when you live through it, you don't understand how monumental that is until after the fact. So I think we're definitely at that turning point. So the economic condition you alluded to both provide, they're making things tougher, but also provide an opportunity to, you mentioned AI, to be able to streamline processes, make things more efficient. As you mentioned, declutter the organization. And it's funny because even as individuals, we pay for SaaS, all kinds of SaaS products. And we sign up and all of a sudden we look at the statement. I was like, I was paying 8 months for what? And I haven't even logged in once. So imagine the enterprise level. So in your expert opinion, what do we see from an opportunity perspective for specifically for cyber to, aside from the decluttering piece, where do you see the kind of the new opportunities for SaaS cyber companies to assist with making the organization more secure? And it seems like there's a lot of AI sprinkled on a lot of these new, just like the cyber, there's all these vernacular that's been used over and over again. And it's just like you mentioned, trusted advisor you don't like, there's this insert this kind of phrase so into the cyber marketing.
I joke, but I swear it's only a half joke. I'm going to go try and find some venture capital that wants to fund me to build an app that detects whether or not a product is really AI or it's something else. Like I want an AI that discovers whether something's really AI or it's just machine learning or it's 55 people in a warehouse somewhere with spreadsheets just working extra fast and producing. Everything's bad.
Well, there's subscribe to Amazon Mechanical Turk.
It's like everything is getting stamped with AI. I used to call it the RSA elevator syndrome. Like when you went to the RSA conference every year, before you even got in the doors, you knew what every vendor was going to scream in your face. Because as you went down the elevator, there was that one sign that somebody would always pay tons of money for to catch you before you come in. The big, brilliant TV looking thing. And it would be AI or zero trust was like for years, all these different things. So every year you knew what you're going to get pounded with. AI is not going away. You're right. This is I'd say like mid 1990s level of revolution. I got in it when I remember, and it's funny because I'm in sales. So I'm seeing all these AI tools are just blasting out of nowhere. And the biggest problem is figure out which ones really, they all seem to do something great. You got to triage which one's greater than the other, but it was the same thing back in the 90s. I got into networking because of Salesforce automation. That was the first big thing I remember really being the big driver. Everybody's getting computers, but then everybody got laptops. And it was almost like laptops are available. Like, what do we do with them? And one of the first things was Salesforce automation. People forget it, that was when people could pull their laptop out at the doctor's office and whip it out. And you would have pictures of something on your laptop screen and you type in their order. And it was that. People don't think of it now. That was revolutionary. My dad was a salesman for 40 years. He literally carried a leather sample case. There's no more sample cases. There's no more paper. It's a laptop. And it was crazy. And since then, it's gone off the hook. So we're in that exact same revolutionary frontier right now. I can't imagine. Honestly, 2 years ago, I thought I could imagine it. Now I can't imagine exactly where we're headed. The consumer drive for the things that are happening is astronomical. I use my wife as an example. She ever saw she'd kill me. She's a teacher, but she was never really like a computer person. She's so far ahead of me on the AI spectrum. It's unbelievable because teachers are getting just flooded with AI tools and they're amazing, like stuff I can't even dream of. And they're leading the charge in education. So all this AI stuff is, from a cyber perspective, we're back to that place where the cyber defense people never did get comfortable. We're always behind the eight ball, always looking over the horizon. I think we're actually farther back than we were, because now, again, this new beast is hitting us and it's unleashed, and we're trying to wrap controls around it, and consumer demand and clients are just pushing. It's going to be interesting how we address it. Like I said, I don't think we've been addressing cyber security and cyber defense that great to begin with. This as a new stressor is going to be a really big uphill challenge. It's tough. Like I said, everything goes back to the business. So when we're talking to clients, they're asking what you're asking. I'm in charge of risk and security, and my sales force wants to do X, Y, and Z with this new AI tool. Or the people that program the machinery in the widget factory have done the same thing for 40 years on these old Siemens boxes. Now they have this AI tool that can shorten their processes each week by 4 hours. What do I do with that? It's the same conundrum we faced when we first, I think it's as big as when we hit the internet. It's the difference between the standalone computing and like token ring to TCP/IP and everything being web enabled 20, 25 years ago.
And it seems like the complexity is just going exponential. It's like a runaway train, meaning people don't understand I don't think people understand how the internet works to begin with. Like just how the TCP/IP works and how you turn an application and it just works. And now we added another layer of a complexity where we keep throwing AI and large language models around, where most people have very little clue in terms of what that means. And then you start layering the risk associated with it. So there's all these reports now, they're doing pen testing for large language models. Why do you even need to do that? Because people are like, oh, it doesn't make any sense. So the runaway train is moving so fast, and these executives are trying to, as you mentioned, while they have to pick up their kids for soccer, they have all these fires to put out, and then they also have to figure out what is going on. What is this whole AI thing? How do we? Because they get questions, right? If you're a cybersecurity executive or a CIO, your board of directors coming over to you and say, "Listen, we're seeing all this AI around, and with the promise of unbelievable efficiencies. What are the risks associated with it? Are we moving? Because if we're not doing it, someone else is doing it. So you're adding all the complexity that already exists, and you added like 3 other layers on top of that. And then that's just not enough. You have all this cybersecurity vendor that kind of like using all this terminology, quite literally just sprinkle AI and automation, orchestration, AI agents. Just there's so many of these vernacular being used by these vendors, which makes it like even the problem even more profound, I think. And you've probably seen that executives coming over to you and saying, hold on for a second, like how do we deploy this? How we protect? Because we've seen quite a vocal industry leader saying that LLMs are 5% wrong. And the problem is we don't know which 5% that is. So they're not applicable for any kind of critical application.
Yeah.
Not yet, anyway.
Everybody, it's an old military axiom. You always fought the last war. And I think, like I said, we're equipped adequately at best to fight the war that we had a couple of years ago. Like we were making headway, or there was a status quo. You could at least, there's a little bit of predictability. I think that's what you're hinting at. There's very little predictability into what we can do right now. We've got all the tools we fought the last war with. People are saying that now, it's AI enabled, just to make it sound better. Maybe it's just machine learning. Maybe it's a bunch of people in a warehouse with spreadsheets, whatever it is. They're trying to, for branding purposes, make it sound like we're hip and cool and we're with the scene, man. But I don't know exactly how you do, honestly, like how do you do an AI risk assessment? We don't have the data yet. And like you say, you have to factor in that the things that we're evaluating aren't 100% there. It's every other software push we've had. Even the stuff that looks trusted or seen at this point seems like an old like ChatGPT seems like that's almost passe at this point, but it's got problems. And that's probably the most widely known, like the water cooler one is ChatGPT. And that's got issues. Like, how do you address that, much less the ones that are really bleeding edge that are just popping off the end of the assembly line every day? And it does go back to when we're on that wild and woolly, everybody's just jumping on the internet. Like you said, like nobody understood. I used to tell people back in those days, do you get the fact that you're on a party line? Like, as soon as you get on the internet, your business, everybody on the planet that has an IP address can theoretically touch your IP address. You're in one big party line. And now with AI adding even more complexity to it or more potential for shenanigans, I'm honestly not quite sure what the next step looks like. I think it'll follow the usual cycle of everybody will be pretty reactive to it. We'll start to get some rudimentary defenses. And I think that everybody will fall back on the best practices that we've always had, which is simplify things, because the more complex your environment, and I know this from my offensive security days, the more complex the environment, it's infinitely easier to get into. The people that honestly had very simple defenses and did them very well and watched their few sort of ports of entry, they were at lower risk. The ones that just had oodles of stuff layered on out of control, or let their user base just define their risk posture, they're the ones where there's trouble. So I think people will go back to not fighting the last war, but going back to best practices, hopefully. Simplify their environment, get a change control process in place that, yes, we agree that the business, your new AI Salesforce automation tool is the greatest thing since sliced bread. We want to help you get this in here, but this is how we do it. They're going to have to really apply a lot of rigor and a lot of discipline to the business, which goes back to you can be your client's best ally, where you can help them talk with their business and translate things to them and figure out how to get things done without, losing your job because you're the one that stands in the progress of the widgets getting made faster. So it's the same old problem that's accelerated.
And then, yeah, absolutely. And that acceleration seems to be something that's ongoing. I think that if you could try to promote firewalls for 10 years, then DLP for 5, MDM, mobile device management for 2. It seems like the windows of opportunities to work on that change, because the enterprise work on projects, meaning that they don't just willy-nilly decide to go and put some money and time and effort towards fixing something. They operate in silos, but those silos, they have to either compress or become agile, because it used to be 24 to 18 months from identifying a problem to implementation. Organizations don't have that time frame anymore, because by the time they implement something, it takes them 24 months. It's already obsolete. The problem has already moved on, and it's a new iteration of that problem. So how do enterprise that they operate almost like a cruise ship in terms of budgeting and operations? How do they deal with all this rapid change?
The answer I'm going to tell you is, you need this new AI tool, and it'll automate that, and then you'll free up all this time, and it won't take you 2 years. It'll take you 6 months. And that's the problem in a nutshell. I'm spending probably a good 10, 15% of my time researching different AI things that make me more efficient. It's like I'm losing time to figure out how to gain back some time, so you're relying on all these recommendations from other people, and I think that's what's going to drive it. It's going to be, you have to keep your business under control, get yourself that breathing space to be able to do these things, but you're going to have to address it. There's no getting away from it. I've been in really toxic environments where people talk about security is a board level decision. I've actually been in one board meeting where one of the board members watched 60 Minutes and saw the CEO of a cybersecurity company on, I won't say who, get interviewed and came to the board meeting that week and said, we're buying that, period, end of story. We're buying that. It's the greatest thing in the world. And the IT and security people just sat there and nodded. And I thought to myself, this is the most toxic thing I've ever seen. So you have to get ahead of this. If you've built a healthy environment at your business, you should be the trusted advisor, the security people and the IT people for your business. They should feel comfortable coming to you and saying, we're really afraid our competition, we all do things the same way. We all get things to market appearance the same way. Our pricing's the same. We fight branding wars, our marketing budgets. We got a Super Bowl ad last year. They're doing it this year. Now, all of a sudden, we're finding out that they're getting things to market 40% faster. And we suspect it's because they're doing X, Y, and Z. Like, can't we do that? That's the position everybody needs to be ready to face yesterday. And if you're in a healthy environment, they can come to you and you'll help them with that. If you're in the bad environment and you haven't worked on this for the past couple of years already, then yeah, they're just going to go ahead and do it. Like, used to find these shadow net when wireless hit or mobile. All of a sudden, the salespeople weren't doing their laptop that we worked for 10 years to harden. They all of a sudden have an iPhone and they figured out, oh, I can use that. I don't need that. Laptop's my kid's using a laptop at home. He's already hacked it and put games on it. I'm using my phone. And the security people wonder why they have a mobile problem. So it goes back to, like you said, with trust. If you're ingrained in the business and they trust you, they're going to be coming to you to help them, not hinder them. There's that stupid security saying that security is like brakes, but you can't it's true. You can't run a car without brakes. You can only go faster if you have better brakes. And I never like saying that because it still puts brakes in the minds of people, but that is what it is. They're wanting to go faster and faster. They're putting a bigger, better motor in this old muscle car. And the Chevy 350 was great, but now they found a Corvette engine. They dropped it in, and now they're really going fast. But you've got these old brakes, the same brakes from there since 1972, and they work great. But you need to be prepared to say, okay, I know which brakes to use because you did that. I can do it. I'm going to need this much money, this many people, whatever the resources are. You have the focus on exactly what you need. You have the sense of urgency because they're pounding on your door to get it done yesterday. And then your last piece of the puzzle is having the resources to do it, the knowledge, the people, the money to be crafts to get these things done. Because it ain't stopping. The business is pounding the doors down now. And like I said, healthy environment, they're asking you. Unhealthy environment, they're doing it behind your back, and you need to get it under control.
And it seems like the industry was the Wild West for the longest time. And I think you mentioned that as well in kind of previous conversations. And we are, as an industry, getting more mature. But I think with that said, there's also, my sense of it is there's a race to the bottom from a pricing and commoditization perspective. There's a lot of companies that now say, we can offer you the same X, but at 1/5 of the price. And I saw an article saying that AI is a contributor to that, meaning that you can take almost any product out there and replicate that. I know Google just announced that they're the SEC filing that 25% of all code is now being written by AI. So you can essentially create almost a whole slew of different products and services, almost from, as you mentioned, two guys in the basement or in the garage, but would do it much more effective. And all of a sudden you become this AI first company where you offer this similar type of service, but a very fraction of the cost. And we see that there's like a lot of companies that offer a whole stack of security controls for $6-7 per per user per month, and they compete on that. They go down to. So where do you think things are going from that perspective? And the fact that there's 5,000 vendors out there trying to compete for the same pocketbook.
I've said it for years. I've seen it cycle, and you've seen it cycle lots of times. I think commoditization leads to consolidation, and we're in the commoditization phase. Years ago, when the scanning tools first came out, like that's when I was involved in a lot of penetration testing and ethical hacking and risk assessments. And I thought, oh man, Qualys is around, all these different tools and Tenable. And I thought, yeah, this is going to be totally commoditized. It's going to put pen testers out of business. And there was no AI. This was just regular software. And there was tons of different tools came out. If you look online, we're still hiring pen testers. And it goes back to your 5% failure rate with LMs. There's always got to be, like with this specific thing, there's always got to be a person at the wheel at some point. So like the pen testers, that skill set is still out there. It's still valuable. There's still lots of them. There's companies that do people pen testing for a living using all these tools. So that commoditization led to really just a consolidation. You started seeing companies use the tools and the people and package it up. Companies getting absorbed by other ones and bigger ones. I think with what's going on now, this commoditization, the business landscape of AI obviously will look radically different 5 or 10 years from now. It may be a company we haven't even heard the name of yet. But the next Google or Amazon or Microsoft may be sitting in a garage somewhere in Eastern Europe being built as we speak. We don't know. And maybe they go around, they buy up 90% of the shops we're talking about right now, and it becomes an Amazon or a Google or a Microsoft. And then there'll always be the ones coming up the assembly line and feeding that cycle. Someone, like you said, there's always going to be a race to the bottom, but then the market always adjusts. It doesn't tolerate cheap for long. It always seems to come back up for some reason. We had some of these things, even the economics of it, some of it could just be loss leaders. Like I said, back in the SaaS wild frontier days, people are operating, no one was making a profit. They were all just grinding things out, trying to get market share, and their valuations were crazy. And it didn't really matter if you're making money. It was more like, would it make me money a few years down the line? We're in that phase again, I think. And the investors are out there, have this fear of missing out, and the FOMO is driving them to try and figure out which of these to snap up. But they'll consolidate. KKR will wind up owning, they'll add a bunch of these companies to their 250 companies they own, and they'll be part of that, and they'll be run that way in Thoma Bravo and the PE firm. They'll all start to absorb this stuff. So the good ones will float to the top out of that commoditization. They'll probably get absorbed or IPO and get bigger and then get absorbed or merge. And the consolidation will happen again. But this time I just feel like it hasn't been this wild since that late 90s, early 2000s. The telco market went.
I know, Joseph. It's really exciting times.
I mean, it used to be, we all had, I don't remember, but all the ISPs that sprung up in the early 2000s, and no one even, where did they all go? There were so many local telephone exchanges and things, the little ISPs that popped up.
And Joseph, I think that now we've seen a similar type of trend with all these MSSPs. One of the fastest growing area of security is these managed service providers, right? They're getting into the space, and they're offering, as you mentioned, this expertise specifically around security services, security as a service, because these companies realize that they don't want to do it in-house. And there's 25,000 of them in the US alone. And it seems almost very similar to the ISP environment that we had before.
Yeah, and that's near and dear to my heart. I think I'm probably working, I lost count. I think I'm at my 6th or 7th MSSP that I've worked at, or they have MSSP in the portfolio. And you're right. Back, it followed the same pattern. 20 years ago, you had a couple of big name ones that started out on the frontier managing things for people, and it was basically red light, green light, managing devices and managing firewalls. Now you've got all these boutique ones that they're an identity MSSP. So they manage SailPoint and CyberArk for you, and they're really good at that. Or they've niched out to a degree. But again, they're starting to, you see them start to consolidate, and it has to. You've got, like you said, we have 20-some thousand managed service providers out there. It's a shopping and selling nightmare. So a lot of people still, they'll fall back on the Gartner buy. They'll just go to the Gartner quadrant and hope for the best. Get one of the bigger, more expensive ones and hope that meets their needs.
And it's a great point. I'll touch upon the fact that I think that this is what, in times of uncertainty from a technology perspective, meaning executives don't really understand the technology, and so no one got fired for buying IBM. I think that's we see some of that similarities where they just go out and buy a brand name as opposed to betting on the unknown in that regards. And we see this quite often. And it's funny, or as you mentioned, they should advertise on 60 Minutes. What do you think was out of that conversation that was so appealing to that executive?
I think, I'm trying to remember the exact context, but I think that that CEO brought up some case studies where it was in their industry. It was in the aircraft supply chain industry, I'll put it that way. Let's say they built seats for 740, whatever.
So very niche. So very niche. That long tail is really plays a role, I think, Joe. Meaning that people like to.
It's that board level
exactly
question of what does good look like and what does our competition look like, which is basically all it boils down to. And depending on what their business model is, how do we exit? That's the third question. But a lot of times when you get that question, are we good? Yeah, we're okay. Is our competition better? Yeah, they might be. How do we get to that? And if that guy watches 60 Minutes at night and he says, they bought this and it sounds like the greatest thing in the world, we got to get that. It's funny. It's weird how impulse buying almost can factor into things. And the PR and advertising, marketing is important. It may not be right. It may not be the right thing to get, but marketing is very important. You can have the best thing out there, but if nobody knows about it, so how many good products have been followed? So it's how many have been bought up and then
so like late night, Joseph, late night QVC ads. Basically, you're sitting there flipping and you come across like a sham. Wow, it seems like an amazing technology. And then if it's, as you mentioned, it's very particular to my industry, that's what really these executives really care about, is the fact that it's the long tail. I think now with the internet always been tailoring to the long tail, you can have a very niche discussion on a very particular technologies in a very particular industry for a particular use case. And that would hit, that's better than 100 salespeople just doing cold calling, because it's really, it's inbound versus outbound. And that executive has already made up his mind.
I always pick on the RSA conference. I remember staying in the aisle one time talking to a buddy, and I saw these folks walk by, and they looked and quacked and smelled like C-level people. If you're in sales long enough, you can figure out who the buyers are. You know the guys that get the checkbook. So these guys are walking by, and they looked very kind of executive. And they had the little map out, and they had stuff circled. And they, as near as I could tell, eavesdropping, because I did social engineering for a living for a while. Like I can't help it. But they were using this little map to go on like a shopping expedition, basically through RSA. And these are all the different vendors they wanted to talk to. And I looked at my buddy, I'm like, this is how these guys are making decisions. Like they literally are circling brand names, and they want to go talk to the salespeople in the booth that are going to sell them on this stuff. I said, what kind of plan is that? It's crazy. You know, if you're to the point where you're just walking around RSA with a shopping list. You're a salesperson's dream, but you're probably a security nightmare. It's not the way to go.
So how do you prove thought leadership? Like, how do you prove that you're the real deal? If you're like a vendor out of the 3,000, and each category, if you're like an EDR, MDR, XDR, how do you prove to an executive that you're the real deal? And maybe potentially you don't have the kind of the marketing budget, the big buying the bulletin boards and the RSA and the stickers on the elevator, spending a gazillion dollars on these things. How do you still manage to elevate yourself from the crowd?
Best tactical thing I've seen that I recommend a lot to startups is partnerships. It sounds trite, but if you can partner yourself with figuratively a big buddy or big brother, you're going to get a lot more airplay with some of these executives. And it's tough. That's a sales job into itself. But the good thing about that is sometimes it's a lower lift because you're not necessarily having to go to 10,000 clients and do your pitch over and over again. If you're dealing with a partner, you're pretty much talking to a peer. And if that peer is convinced that this is going to improve their posture with a client or make them stronger in their pitch, you're not going to embarrass them and you're going to make them money, that's a different scenario altogether than having to convince a client that give them that slide that every vendor has with all the red and green lights, and your column is all green lights because, of course, you do everything. Your competitors don't do anything. It's the worst argument in the world. But if you're literally partnering, going in the door with someone, a two-headed model, or they're reselling you or willing to put it on the line, that's a quick lift to elevate. And even with like online, you see all these webinars that are two-headed monster webinars a lot of time. It's like IBM and whatever, some Joe's antivirus. And we're not going to talk about Joe's antivirus. We're going to talk about this topic. But here's the CTO from this company. It's a Series B startup. They've been in business for 3 or 4 years. They got some legitimacy, but they're not us. The fact that you're bringing them on board, they're experts with your expert talking to that captive audience, that's pretty powerful. So partnerships are probably the easiest for that.
I would say the devil's advocate here is that some of these partners do not do business or do not partner unless you have X amount of revenue already. They ask you, okay, what's your revenue right now? So if you're between a rock and a hard place, you're one side, you're trying to partner, and the other side, they're asking you, are you doing $40 million in sales? And the reason why we don't do $20 million in sales because we don't have a partner like you. So it's a catch-22. Like,
it's hard.
How do you overcome that?
Like the pre-seed level people are got trouble, but there's different levels to everything. You work your way up the food chain. There's partners. You might be a seed level startup, some little 3 guys, and they've got a couple salespeople or something and a great product. You're probably pitching to a Series B or C or D company that's maybe 3 or 4 years ahead of you to partner with them. You might be a multi-factor authentication shop, and you've got a great one. It's going to, there's a zillion of them. You're better than everybody else. But you manage to convince a privileged access management company that's 10 years old, but they're not huge. They're 2 or 3 in their category. You get to them and pitch to them that working with us, we've got this unified message that when you do privileged access, you need to have a really strong multi-factor authentication. That's going to be our go-to-market. And that's going to give you an advantage with your 800-pound gorilla who's not paying attention to this niche. They don't care. That's not one of their talk tracks. Like, this is your chance to capture something that's important that the 800-pound gorilla doesn't care about because they're doing commoditized big sales and they're selling all their modules and all their different spin-offs and add-ons to their product. So yeah, depending on your level, you always go to it's like when you dress for an interview, you dress one level above everybody else, when you're trying to partner, you want to partner with a big four firm. That'd be great. If you've got E&Y using your tool for something, that's fantastic, but it's tough to get there. But if you've got that, I always call them like complementary competition. They're in your space, but they're not directly competing with you. And you're like, you do it better together. But better together is easier when both companies are a little bit closer together. And then as you grow and you start leapfrogging up, all of a sudden, yeah, you're going to war with ServiceNow, or you're going to war with Salesforce.com, or one of the big companies. By then, you probably have enough branding on your own that you can do a lot of things. But it's a good leapfrog.
What about the self-service model, like the try and buy? Meaning, there's a lot of companies out there that offer you to just basically you put in your credit card, you get the service for 15 days, and at that moment on, unless you cancel, you're now a customer. And I think that coming back to the consultative sale, trusted advisor, I think that the whole middle ground it was always like the low end transactional, the middle kind of sales, and then the high end consultative. I think where the low end was commoditized, it's all like self-service online. You can just go and buy. The middle one is also getting commoditized because that's also becoming very transactional. So the only thing that's left is like the high end, like bespoke solutions, but the rest of it is becoming almost like self-service.
Yeah.
Companies are just putting their stuff out there. There's nothing worse, I think, than saying, okay, the price list, Joe, like just a price list saying, okay, contact us.
Yeah.
Like, I think contact us because they don't actually provide you the pricing.
I think the biggest thing, and from the go-to-market people, what they're worrying about right now is how to address that to a large degree. I think it's going to be a consumption model. Almost if you get Amazon Cloud or something, it's going to be use what you need, or buy what you need, or whatever, buy on demand, buy what you need. I think that's where a lot of the market's going to go to. Even the try buy thing, I think people are almost bypassing that. Why offer it for free? Tell people, buy a license. You use it. And that, like the software we're using right now, you use it. And then if you like it, then your team of salespeople is going to be using it a month from now. I know that. But I'll charge you $7 for your try and buy. And you'll probably be having 15 to 20 people use it. The only problem from my perspective, or to go to market people, the predictability is difficult. The forecasting is a little bit harder. You get there. Amazon is so good at what they do. They are an amazing data company, but it's more difficult for these smaller companies to have that predictability in there, which leads to it's more difficult for them to get their next round of investing. So that consumption model is going to be interesting because you need to be able to prove it out to investors. And when you're at that super early stage, you're trying to just get your Series A funding, and they're asking you what your five-year plans, they're ridiculous anyway. But when they're looking for your forecasting, it's a little bit more difficult when you have that consumption model. So there's a lot of talk and a lot of different mathematical models and data models going into that forecasting right now. People are trying to figure out how to make money. But I firmly believe that is the way it's.
And the next model after that, so I agree, utility consumption. The next model after that is that they're trying to do is the outcome model. So you're not paying for the actual consumption, you're paying for results. So, but it's hard to do because for cyber, if nothing happens, so how do you prove that you are, let's say, blocked a certain amount of adversaries, or how many, or save the company a certain amount of breaches? It's very tough because potentially you can say, okay, every time I protect your organization and you're not getting breached, I'm charging you $10,000.
Yeah, it's funny. You can't see it, but there's 3 or 4 books back here on quantification, like risk quantification, things like that. But quantification in general is something that security and risk people should, again, they should have been paying attention to this for the past couple of decades to prove their worth to the business. It is more difficult. I used to say years ago with the pen testing and all, the clients, we spent a lot of time preaching to clients about how great our pen testers were. We wouldn't give their names, but they say this person did this and this person broke the iPhone, and it was like a whole resume listing, and you should hire us because of that. But then it dawned on me with one client in particular, really shit on it. All they wanted was the report. They weren't buying the pen testers or their expertise or how good they were or how many talks they gave at DEF CON. They just wanted the damn report. And that's what they paid for. And oddly, our reports were mediocre. And we worked on making them better and putting some more stuff in there. Not just saying, you've got this, but now everybody does, but here's how you can remediate it. Give them different tips and things. So the value add wound up being on the back end of the thing. Like, it wasn't just, we did this amazing report and we're such great hackers. It was, here's the report. These are the steps. It's giving you the added value that helps your business. So quantification is going to be a big deal. You're right. If you're just selling somebody a dashboard that the risk needles go back and forth all day, what's it giving them? You have to be able to give them something. We always call it the board level report. One of the things that's be built in there is something that as that data goes upstream, there used to be something called the green dashboard disease. The analyst in the SOC is like, everything looks good, man. All the lights are green. Like, we're fine. That gets reported up. And then a month later, the CISO goes into the board with this one slide that's got a million things on it. It says, yep, everything's green. We're perfect. You're not. It's not. So you need to get your real data and make it digestible at some point for the business to be able to prove this out. Because next year, when you say I need $25 million to secure us, they're going to say, what does secure mean? And you're going to have to say secure means that when we went into China to do business last year, bought up some factories over there on the cheap and we brought our manufacturing costs down. We didn't see a associated risk level go up. We stayed steady. And give them all this business data. So that quantification is good. It's not just risk quantification. You have to figure out how to quantify stuff across the whole environment. And the vendors don't, by and large, that's not something that vendors think of. They think about annual recurring revenue and how to make their feature set better than their competitor. They're not always thinking about the business.
Yeah, they're focusing way too much on technology. I don't think they ever think about the business. I think
in their defense, it's tough because some vendors are very vertical centered, but by and large, you're trying to sell everything to all people. It is hard. Like, you might be selling mousetrap, the greatest mousetrap, but you're selling it in the Amazon where the mice are 4.5 pounds. Your great mousetrap is not going to address the needs of these people have rats that are the size of a raccoon. So when you go into some of these different environments, it's a little bit easier. Now, if you're an IoT, OT vendor that's dealing with mainly industrial security, you actually have an easier time of it. The nichier you are, you should be able to get them that business result a lot easier. If you're a ServiceNow, then yeah, you have to make all these different models and all these different things and all these and you have to be huge. But if you're doing a really good manufacturing plant security solution and it's geared towards a certain industry, you should be able to give them something that helps them with the business. Like, you should be able to say, because of this, we experienced less failures on X, Y, and Z, or the risk went down on when these poor Boeing had the Boeing planes flew better, whatever. Which I don't know how they're going to fix that.
So this has been great. I just one or two more questions. It's been absolutely phenomenal. So while we're chatting here, I think that one of the risks that we are facing is the fact that it seems like we're defender side, And we are very cautious about deploying technology, utilizing them to our advantage because we have board of directors, report, and so on. We're not as agile. But on the other side, the adversaries are very quick to adopt tools that are available to them to hack organizations. Very quick. They like the first adopters for any of these like AI technologies and deep fake and you name it. And then now it's like a business, right? So they're using a crime as a service. So I think that's the main issue is that, as you mentioned, there was, for the longest time, there was this almost like a balance between defenders and the adversaries. And that balance seems to be slightly shifting towards their advantage just because due to the fact that they can adopt some of these early technologies.
Yeah, and again, we should be used to that part of it because, like I said, when the security tools first started coming online 15, 20 years ago, we ran into the same problem. The criminals had access to the same thing we did, and maybe even sooner, and they may be writing the tools. I remember, like, people don't talk about encryption a whole lot now, but I remember running across at one client, one of their databases was encrypted, and we were talking and they said, we don't use encryption. And we found out that it was that people had broken in, they were storing stuff there and they were encrypting it because they didn't want the other hacker gangs breaking in and stealing their stuff because it was useless because it was encrypted. And I remember thinking, well, that's cool. The attackers are actually using like really good security practices in this wide open, completely breached environment. And we're back to that paradigm where
Joe, I have to tell you, I've heard a similar story where somebody uncovered a server that was being used to crypto mine. And it's funny because it's exactly what they did is they made sure that the actual server was completely patched and protected against others to come in. So they did a phenomenal job bringing it up to speed from a security perspective, just so they can assure the fact that it will still be utilized by their own service.
People are learning stuff somewhere. Don't quit your day job. I think there's a lot of people working and getting that free education and getting the experience, and their night job is breaking into 7-Elevens. It's their soccer mom by day and hacker by night. You never know. Yeah, they're getting better and more automated. And like I said, it's a spy versus spy again with AI versus AI, which I don't think you necessarily need AI to fight AI. Some of the stuff has to be, but that shouldn't be the knee-jerk reaction. But a lot of the best practices that have been proven out should mitigate a lot of this to an extent. Why you are able to work in the background to figure out which of these newer, better, flashier things you're going to adopt and combat this stuff. But yeah, the attackers always seem to be half a step ahead. They're quicker. Years ago,
Yeah. Joe, should we move back
to what?
Should we move back to pencil and paper for a little while until everything
You can't see my watch, but
back?
I'm the most analog person you could possibly meet. I have a paper day planner. I wear a mechanical watch. I'm a complete Luddite, I swear. No one's gonna hack it. No one's gonna EMP my watch.
Joseph, it's like the carpenter. What did it say? That the shoemaker walks around bare feet.
Cobbler's kid have no shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it. So, last question: if you could make a bet of which technology would become the next big thing in security, maybe you say, like, aside from AI, what is out there that's exciting? Because they're talking about quantum computing, and now there's anti-quantum computing, the technologies out there. There's just so much. What would be the best bet if you had the next 12 to 18 months?
There's companies out there doing this, but like you said, they're in that kind of commoditization phase where they haven't really consolidated their offerings, or There's a lot of voices out in the wilderness. I think it's the predictive risk part of it. We should, just the little bit of things I'm seeing now, we should be able to be a lot better at the predictive part of it. Like I always pound on this doing business in China thing, but we should get to the point where when the CIO or the CEO of the company says, we need to expand to China. We don't really want to, but costs are cheaper. We know we can do it. The competition's all doing it. We have to do it to stay competitive. We know there's a risk, but what's going to happen? Like we should be able to tell them, yes, there's going to be a 27% increase in risk by doing this and this. And then when they say, well, what's that mean? It's like the red, like when we give them the red and green slides, like what is red? What is green? That quantification, that predictability needs to be built in. But like I said, I don't see why with all the AI that's available, honestly, not the machine learning, but true AI and the huge data lakes and everything that are out there, that we can't crunch the data a little bit better to at least start quantifying all the historical knowledge we have of all this risk and everything that's been happening and is happening now, and start to get some predictability around it. The insurance industry can tell you the day that I'm going to die. You know what I mean? And I think that security and risk needs to get to that point. We need to be able to like almost be able to amortize risk out farther and be able to give our business leaders some sort of direction. So when we say it's going to be, our risk is going to increase by 27% if we do X, Y, and Z, they'll start to know what that means. They're not going to need to be spoon-fed. It'll be like any other, our marketing cost will go up 27 points. Oh, okay. I get that. Our customer acquisition cost will drop by 3%. It's got to become a business discussion. The risk part of it has to be just woven into it.
Yeah, and the insurance company is very good about doing that. They have all these morbid tables, right, where they can tell you if you walk in New York City, what are the odds of you falling through a gutter? There's odds. There's because they had 200 years of data. So they can tell you pretty accurately.
And they've been doing that for a century. Like, if they could do it with an abacus and green accounting books in 1905, then why can't we do it with quantum computing in 2024 with a different set of data? Like, it's doable. We should be looking at that. But like you said, we're very on the defensive. We're very reactive. We don't think about the business enough. And a lot of it's not our fault, but we need to stop saying it's not our fault. Go out, involve yourself in the business, find out. It may not work at the company you're at. That may not be the place that they're ready to deal with it. But you learning now or starting yesterday to figure out what the business constraints are will do you a lot of good. Maybe not the company you're at, but maybe the next one. You can bring those lessons to bear. And then hopefully our development market, we'll catch up.
And Joe, I always like to convene in with a positive note, but you already established that. And I love that because you mentioned that we have the ability to predict the future by utilizing a lot of the tools we have and a lot of the kind of the massive data we collect. Now with the kind of the AI and machine learning, we have the ability to do so. And we're going to get better over time. And I think that will going to be very useful for organizations to be able to focus, to figure out what is coming and be proactive versus reactive. Because as you mentioned, we're so ADD and we have so many things on a regular basis on a personal level. So you're an executive now, you have to deal with putting out fires and dealing with everything else. It's very taunting. But we have faith in the technology that will fix some of these.
I think we will. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Joe. What's the easiest way for people to get in touch, to provide feedback? Just you name it, get in touch with you.
I'm on LinkedIn a lot. What's the easiest way? I tend to lurk around there. It's the greatest social engineering sales tool known to man, quite frankly. It worked great in consulting. It works great for sales. So I'm on there. You guys can find me. Joe Schorr, SCHORR.
Awesome. Fantastic. So for everyone who joined, thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing you at the next episode. And until then, stay safe online as well as offline.
Thanks, David.
I'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.